After losing both of his parents in a tragic car accident just weeks before Christmas, 8-year-old James Carter faces his first holiday completely alone. With no proper clothes, no shoes for the winter cold, and no family left to hold him, James struggles to survive his quiet, painful days in a small American town. But when Christmas Eve arrives, a heartbreaking miracle begins, one that could change James' life forever. Snow drifted across the empty sidewalk as James Carter, an 8-year-old boy with soft brown hair and tired blue eyes, sat alone on the wooden bench outside the old community church in Cleveland, Ohio. His thin jacket, far too small for the freezing wind, did little to protect him from the sharp December cold. Cars passed by without slowing. People rushed home with shopping bags full of Christmas presents, laughing, talking, living their warm lives. But James? He had no home to return to. Not anymore. Just 3 months earlier, his world had been shattered. His parents, Michael and Laura Carter, had been driving home after picking out early Christmas decorations. They always decorated the house before Thanksgiving because Laura loved lights and Michael loved seeing her smile. That night, the roads were wet from fresh rain. A truck skidded. A single moment of impact. And James' life changed forever. 2 funerals, 2 graves, 1 little boy left behind. For weeks he stayed with distant relatives, but they didn't want a child, especially not one who cried at night, who woke up screaming, who missed the smell of his mother's cinnamon cookies and the sound of his father's deep voice reading bedtime stories. They left him at a temporary shelter, promised to return. They never did. And now, 3 days before Christmas, the shelter was out of space due to a pipe burst. James had nowhere to go for the night. The volunteers told him to wait near the church until they arranged something. But as the hours passed, the sky turned darker, the wind colder, and the sidewalk emptier. James hugged his knees to his chest, burying his face in the sleeves of his thin jacket. His sneakers, worn with holes at the toes, soaked in the snow. He whispered into the cold air, "Mom, Dad, are you watching me?" The wind rustled the Christmas wreath on the church door. A single light inside flickered on. James looked up. His breath came out in trembling clouds. He didn't know it yet, but someone inside had seen him. Someone who would soon change everything. Inside the church, Pastor Emily Dawson, a warm-hearted woman in her mid-40s, with tired eyes and a gentle soul, noticed the small figure curled up outside the frosted window. She had stayed late preparing Christmas Eve donations for the local families in need. At first, she thought it was just a passerby, but when she looked again, she realized the child wasn't moving. Her heart clenched. She grabbed her coat, pushed the heavy door open, and stepped out into the freezing wind. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Are you okay?" James lifted his head slowly. His cheeks were red from cold, his eyes watery, not just from wind, but from deep, quiet sadness. I'm fine," he whispered, though every part of him shook. Emily's voice softened even more. "What's your name, honey?" "James." "That's a strong name," she said with a small smile. "James, it's too cold for you to be out here. Do you have somewhere to go?" James hesitated. He didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want anyone to feel sorry for him, and he didn't trust adults easily anymore. They had a way of leaving. I'm waiting for someone, he muttered. How long have you been waiting? James looked down. A long moment passed. Emily's eyes softened. She recognized the look. She had seen enough abandoned kids to know when one had been left behind. Come inside, she urged gently. I won't ask anything you don't want to share, but you shouldn't be freezing out here. James wanted to say no, but his fingers were numb, his lips trembling, his stomach empty, so he followed her inside. The warmth hit him like a hug he didn't expect. The church was decorated with soft yellow lights, a tall tree, and boxes of donated toys wrapped in colorful paper. But James didn't look at any of it. He stared at the floor, clutching the sleeves of his thin jacket. Emily watched him for a moment, noticing how carefully he held the cup, like he was afraid to drop it, afraid to lose something else. Honey, she began gently, is someone coming to pick you up? James swallowed hard. No. Do you have a home? He didn't answer. Emily sat next to him. James, sweetheart, where are your parents? James shut his eyes tight. He didn't cry. He refused to, but his lips trembled and his voice cracked in a whisper. They're gone. Emily's heart broke in an instant. I'm so sorry, she whispered. James stared at the cocoa, tears gathering in his eyes. It's Christmas, he said in a small voice. Everyone gets presents and hot chocolate and happy stuff. I just want to go home, but there is no home. The dam inside him cracked. Emily instinctively wrapped her arms around him, and James, who hadn't been held since the night of the accident, collapsed into her hug, sobbing silently. She held him tighter. You're not alone anymore. Not tonight. Not anymore. After James calmed, Emily asked softly, Sweetheart, do you have warm clothes? A coat? Boots? James shook his head. All I have is this. Emily looked at the jacket, thin, torn, useless in the winter snow. Her heart clenched. James, she said gently, how about we get you some warm Christmas clothes tomorrow? A coat, boots, gloves, anything you like. James' eyes widened with disbelief. For me? Yes, honey, for you. But I don't have money. You don't need money. She smiled warmly. You just need hope. James looked down, overwhelmed. Nobody had done something for him in months. Nobody had offered warmth or kindness or love. Emily placed a soft hand on his shoulder. This Christmas, she whispered, is going to be a little different, and you're not spending it alone. I promise. And for the first time since his parents died, James felt a tiny spark inside him. A spark called hope. The next morning, pale sunlight crept through the stained glass windows of the church, spilling warm colors across the wooden floor. James woke up on a small cot Pastor Emily had set up for him. A soft blanket wrapped around him, a pillow under his head, and the faint smell of cinnamon drifting in the air. For a moment, he forgot where he was. For a moment, it felt like waking up in his old home, the one with the Maplewood kitchen, his mom humming Christmas songs, his dad sipping coffee while pretending he didn't like it when James climbed onto his lap. But the moment faded. Reality returned. He wasn't home. He had no home. But he wasn't on the freezing street either. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. His body felt warm for the first time in days. Outside, soft snowflakes drifted down, painting the streets in white. Emily walked in carrying a small tray with oatmeal, a banana, and a steaming cup of cocoa. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said with a gentle smile. James blinked. No one had called him sweetheart since his mom. He whispered, "Hi. I hope you slept well." He nodded shyly. "Thank you for letting me stay. You're always welcome here," she replied softly. Emily noticed something. James didn't eat fast the way hungry kids usually did. He took small bites, polite, careful, like he was afraid someone might take it away. She sat beside him. "James, do you want to tell me where you stayed before last night?" He hesitated. "I was at the shelter, but they said they were full because of a pipe thing." "And before the shelter?" He lowered his gaze. "A family took me for a while, but I cried too much. They didn't want me." Emily swallowed the ache in her throat. "Honey, crying doesn't make you unwanted." James didn't answer. He just picked at the banana, silent. When he finished breakfast, Emily held out a small slip of paper. "I have a surprise for you today." James blinked. "A surprise?" "Yes. The church received a donation card for winter clothing. I want you to choose a warm coat, gloves, boots, and whatever else you need." His eyebrows shot up. His lips parted. He stared at her like she had said something impossible. For me? "For you, James." "But other kids need things too." Emily smiled warmly. "And you are one of those kids." He swallowed hard, unsure how to accept kindness anymore, but needing it more than anything. They stepped out into the snowy street. James walked close to Emily, partly because of the cold, partly because he wasn't used to walking with an adult who cared. The town looked magical, snowflakes floating down like tiny diamonds, Christmas wreaths hanging from every door, carol music drifting in the distance. James tightened his thin jacket around him. Emily noticed. "We'll fix that soon," she said softly. They reached Harper's Winter Wear, a small, warm clothing shop decorated with red ribbons and a Christmas tree glowing in the window. The moment they stepped inside, heat wrapped around them. A cheerful woman with curly blonde hair greeted them. "Good morning. Looking for something special today?" "Yes," Emily said, placing a hand on James's shoulder. "This young man needs proper winter clothes." The shopkeeper's smile softened when she saw James, thin, quiet, with worn-out shoes. "Well then," she said warmly, "we'll find you something perfect." James tried on coats for the first time in months. A navy blue puffer coat, a red one with a fur-lined hood, a dark green one that made him look like a tiny explorer. But then he saw it. A simple gray coat, soft, warm, just like the one his dad used to wear. He touched the sleeve, eyes softening with memories. "You like that one?" Emily asked. James nodded. "Can I try it?" "Of course, sweetheart." He slipped it on. It fit. Perfectly. Emily laughed lightly. "You look so handsome, James." He blushed and looked away, but secretly, he liked hearing it. Next came boots. His fingers brushed a pair of dark brown snow boots lined with wool. "Those look sturdy," Emily said. "They look like Dad's boots," he whispered. She didn't push, didn't make him talk about his parents. She just nodded. "Then I think they're the right choice." They picked gloves, a scarf, and a soft woolen hat. The shopkeeper threw in a pair of thermal socks for free. "This is on me, young man," she whispered to James. "Every kid deserves warm feet at Christmas." James didn't know what to say. His eyes glistened again. Not from sadness this time, but from feeling seen. Walking back to the church, James finally spoke. "Pastor Emily?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Why are you helping me?" Emily stopped in the snow. She knelt in front of him, looking into his wide, uncertain blue eyes. Because you deserve help. You deserve warmth. You deserve love. And because no child should feel alone at Christmas. His voice trembled. But what if you leave too? Emily's heart cracked open. I won't, she whispered. I promise you, James, you're safe with me. He looked like he wanted to believe her. He looked like he needed to. Slowly, James reached out and took her hand. For the first time in a long time, he let someone in. That evening, the church held a small Christmas charity event. Families came to pick up donated toys and food baskets. Kids laughed and played near the tree, their faces glowing with holiday excitement. And James stood quietly beside Emily, holding a cup of cocoa she made for him. One little girl ran up to him with a candy cane. "Merry Christmas," she chirped. James blinked, surprised. Merry Christmas?" Emily smiled at him from across the room. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't forgotten. Someone cared. And tomorrow, Christmas Eve, his new life would begin in ways he couldn't imagine. Because a miracle was coming. A miracle meant for him. Snow fell heavier the next morning, blanketing the streets in a thick white layer. Christmas Eve had arrived, and every window in the neighborhood glowed with warm lights, garlands, and Christmas trees. Laughter spilled from houses as families prepared meals, wrapped presents, and played holiday music. But inside the small church, the atmosphere was quiet, peaceful, soft. James woke up slowly, wrapped in the warm blanket Pastor Emily had tucked around him the night before. The church heater hummed softly, and the scent of pine from the Christmas tree filled the space. He sat up, rubbing his sleepy eyes. For a few seconds, he forgot he was alone in the world. For a few seconds, he imagined waking up to his mother's gentle voice and the sound of his father pretending Santa had visited early. Then reality washed back over him. But it didn't hurt as sharply today, because he wasn't waking up on a bench, or in a cold shelter hallway, or in the dark. He was safe, warm, inside a place that felt just a little like a home. Emily entered with a soft smile. "Good morning, James." He looked up at her, still shy but more comfortable than yesterday. "Morning," he murmured. "I made you something special." She lifted a small plate. Chocolate chip pancakes. James blinked. Pancakes? For him? "They were my son's favorite," she said gently. "He used to beg me to make them every morning." James's eyes widened a little. You have a son?" Emily hesitated for the slightest second. "I had a son. His name was Daniel. He passed away when he was 10. James froze. He looked up at her with new understanding, new connection. Did it hurt a lot?" he whispered. Emily's voice trembled the tiniest bit. "It still hurts," she admitted, "but helping other children makes me feel like I'm keeping his love alive." James lowered his gaze. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Emily gently cupped his cheek. "And I'm sorry for your parents, sweetheart. No child should carry that pain alone." He swallowed. "You don't have to be alone anymore, James." His throat tightened. Not out of sadness, but because something warm was slowly returning inside him. Something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The day began quietly. Emily let James help with simple tasks, setting out candles for the Christmas Eve service, tying ribbons around donation boxes, placing little bells on the pews. At first, James worked silently, but then something rare happened. He smiled. Just a tiny one. Barely there, but it was real. It happened when a small toddler tugged on his sleeve and handed him a cookie shaped like a reindeer. "For you," the child squeaked. James blinked in surprise. "Thank you." The toddler giggled and ran off, leaving James frozen with the cookie in his hands. Emily noticed from across the room. "He doesn't know how to accept kindness," she thought sadly. "He doesn't know how to be a child anymore." But today, she hoped, he would remember. Later in the afternoon, Emily gave him a choice. "James, I have 2 things we can do today, and you get to choose." His eyebrows rose. No one ever let him choose anything. "What things?" he asked cautiously. "1, we can go help the food kitchen deliver Christmas meals to older people who live alone." James's eyes softened a little. "And 2, we can go to the Christmas market downtown. There's a giant tree, lights everywhere, Christmas music, hot chocolate, and lots of families." James stiffened at the last part. Families. Suddenly, he imagined fathers lifting their kids to see the decorations, mothers laughing with their daughters, parents holding hands, and himself watching from the outside. His breath hitched. I don't know," he whispered. Emily knelt beside him. "Honey, you don't have to decide now, but whatever we do, we'll do together. You won't be alone." He nodded slowly, but his chest tightened with fear. What if he grew too attached? What if she left? What if this feeling disappeared? What if he wasn't allowed to keep it? A quiet hour passed. James sat near the church window watching snow fall thickly, swirling like soft white feathers. Children ran across the street pulling sleds, parents stumbling after them with hot chocolate cups and cameras. Everywhere he looked, he saw families. Happy families. Complete families. And he felt a sting of loneliness so sharp it made his little chest ache. His eyes watered. He wiped them with his sleeve quickly, embarrassed even though nobody was watching. But someone was. Emily stood behind him, seeing the way he curled into himself. She walked over, gently placing a soft wool scarf around his neck, the one they bought yesterday. "You don't have to hide your feelings from me, James," she said softly. He stared at his feet. "I don't want to ruin your day or be a problem." Emily knelt, gently lifting his chin so she could look into his eyes. "You're not a problem. You're a blessing, and spending Christmas Eve with you is a gift to me." His lips trembled. "Really? Really?" Silence hung in the air, warm and fragile. Finally, James whispered, "Can we go to the Christmas market, just for a little?" Emily smiled and brushed his hair back gently. "I'd love that." The Christmas market. Downtown Cleveland sparkled with lights. The Christmas market glowed with thousands of string lights draped across wooden stalls. Christmas music floated through the cold air, children's laughter echoed, and the giant Christmas tree stood proudly in the middle, shimmering brighter than the stars above. But walking into the crowd made James shrink back. Emily noticed. She knelt down, offering her hand. "You can hold on to me if you want." He hesitated. Then slowly, he slipped his small hand into hers. That simple touch made something inside him unclench. They walked together through the glowing market. People smiled at them. A man offered free warm cider. Someone handed James a peppermint stick. A woman selling ornaments gave him a tiny snowman for free. "Christmas magic," she said with a wink. James looked at the snowman ornament as if it were something precious. He didn't understand why strangers were being kind to him. But for the first time, he didn't push the kindness away. The giant tree. They reached the huge Christmas tree, towering above the crowd, covered in warm white lights, golden ribbons, and glittering ornaments. Kids gathered around, taking pictures. Parents lifted toddlers onto their shoulders. Families hugged under the glowing branches. James stood perfectly still. The lights reflected in his eyes. Emily watched him quietly. "Honey, are you okay?" James swallowed hard. "My mom used to love Christmas trees. She always made me help her put the star on top." His voice softened to a fragile whisper. "Can she see me right now?" Emily placed a hand over her heart. "I believe she sees you, and I believe she's proud of you, and she's glad you're safe." James squeezed his eyes shut, trying not to cry. But when he opened them, a single tear rolled down his cheek, and then another. Emily leaned down and gently pulled him into a hug. James didn't resist. He wrapped his arms around her and cried into her coat, quiet, broken, deep cries that had been locked inside him for months. No one stared, no one judged. People simply passed by, smiling softly, letting the boy have his moment. Emily held him tightly, whispering, "You're allowed to cry. You've been so strong for so long. Let it out, sweetheart. I'm right here." And under the glow of the giant Christmas tree, James finally released the pain he'd been holding inside. He cried and cried and cried, until the weight on his chest grew lighter, until breathing didn't hurt as much, until he felt, just for a moment, like maybe the world wasn't entirely cruel. When he pulled away, something had changed. His face was red from tears. His nose sniffled. His eyes were swollen. But his heart felt a tiny bit less broken. "Thank you," he whispered. Emily wiped his tears gently with her thumb. "You're not alone anymore, James. Not today. Not on Christmas Eve." James took a shaky breath. "Can we stay a little longer?" Emily smiled warmly. "As long as you want." And so, for the first time since losing his parents, James spent Christmas Eve surrounded by light, warmth, and a feeling he thought he'd never feel again: belonging. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and a miracle was waiting for him. A miracle that would change his life forever. The sky outside glowed a deep, starless gray as the last slivers of daylight vanished behind the city skyline. Christmas Eve had reached its peak, and a bitter wind swept through Cleveland's streets, making every exposed finger tingle and every nose run. But James Carter, 8 years old, had long since learned to ignore the cold. For James, the bitter winter wasn't just outside. It had been inside his chest for months. The absence of his parents left a hollow ache he couldn't fill. Every laugh from passing families, every twinkle from the Christmas lights was a reminder of what he had lost and would never have again. He had spent the day at the downtown Christmas market with Pastor Emily, holding her hand tightly, walking through stalls, tasting a warm cup of cider, and gazing up at the enormous Christmas tree. It had been magical. But now, walking back toward the church, the lights fading behind him, the reality of the coming night returned. James's small shoulders hunched under his thin navy coat. His gloves, scarf, and hat were a little too large, gifts from the kind-hearted shopkeeper yesterday. They were warm, yes, but they could not warm the emptiness in his heart. He walked silently beside Emily, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You've been very brave today, James," Emily said gently. "Not just for facing the cold, but for opening your heart a little. That's not easy after everything you've been through." James didn't answer. He didn't know how. He had learned long ago that bravery didn't erase pain. It just buried it. The shelter that failed him. As they reached the church, James paused. He thought of all the nights he had spent shivering in the shelter, counting each second, wishing for something, anything to make him feel safe. He remembered the harsh fluorescent lights, the hard cots, the quiet whispers of children who cried themselves to sleep wondering why their parents had left them too. And then he remembered the night of the accident, the rain, the screeching tires, the blinding headlights, and the cold, unrelenting silence that followed. He shivered, despite his warm coat, not from the cold outside, from the memories. Emily noticed. "James?" she said softly, kneeling to meet his eyes. "Do you want to talk about it?" James shook his head quickly. "No, it's nothing." Emily's heart clenched. She had learned that forcing words from a child too soon would do more harm than good. "That's okay," she whispered. "You don't have to talk if you're not ready. I just want you to know it's not your fault. Not ever." James nodded faintly, though a part of him still wanted to hide, to disappear. Back at the church. Inside the church, Emily had prepared a small room for James, a cot near the back, a soft blanket, and a small lamp casting a gentle golden glow. The smell of pine from the Christmas tree and cinnamon from the candles filled the room, creating a warmth that went beyond what his coat could provide. James climbed onto the cot, hugging himself, feeling the tiny sense of safety that had been absent for months. Emily knelt beside him. "James," she said softly, "tonight you don't have to be brave. You don't have to hide your feelings. You can be tired. You can cry. You can just be a boy, okay?" James swallowed. The lump in his throat made it hard to speak. I don't know how to be a boy anymore. I don't know how to smile." Emily reached out and held his hand gently. "Then I'll help you," she said. "We'll take it one step at a time. Tonight, we'll just try. And tomorrow, we'll see what miracles Christmas can bring." James didn't respond. He just lay back, eyes wide open, staring at the faint glimmer of light from the window, letting the warmth slowly seep into his frozen body. Emily left the room briefly to grab a cup of cocoa, returning moments later with a small plate of cookies. She placed it on a low table beside James. "For you," she said softly. "You don't have to eat if you're not hungry, but if you want, you can." James hesitated, staring at the small chocolate chip cookies. He hadn't eaten properly in days, surviving mostly on the kindness of strangers and leftover snacks. Slowly, he picked up one cookie, took a bite, and chewed carefully. It was sweet. It was warm. And for a brief moment, it reminded him of home. He swallowed, tears welling in his eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Emily nodded, a soft smile on her face. "No need to thank me. You deserve this. You deserve everything warm and good." James didn't cry yet, but the ache in his chest loosened just a little. The walls he had built around himself over months of loss started to tremble. The magic of Christmas Eve. As night fell, Emily lit the small candles along the pews, their gentle glow filling the room. Outside, snow fell in thick, silent flakes, covering the streets with a blanket of white, and somewhere above, stars twinkled faintly, as if watching over the little boy who had lost everything, and yet might gain a Christmas miracle. The first rays of Christmas morning filtered softly through the frosted windows of the church. James Carter stirred under his warm blanket, blinking sleepily at the golden glow that spilled across the wooden floor. The world outside was still blanketed in fresh snow, sparkling like a million tiny diamonds under the weak winter sun. For a moment, James forgot the cold, the loneliness, and the emptiness that had defined his life for months. He remembered only warmth, a gentle hand resting on his shoulder, a voice telling him he wasn't alone. He sat up slowly, his thin fingers curling around the edges of the blanket. His eyes wandered across the room, taking in the small Christmas tree in the corner, the soft glow of the candles, and the pile of donated toys and warm clothes neatly stacked by the wall. It felt like home, Emily's morning surprise. Pastor Emily entered quietly, holding a small wrapped box in her hands. "Good morning, James," she said softly, kneeling beside his cot. "Morning," he whispered, still rubbing his eyes. Emily held out the small box. "I have something for you. It's a little Christmas gift." James stared at the box, hesitating. He hadn't received a gift since the accident. He barely remembered what it was like to be given something without strings attached. His lips trembled slightly as he reached out to touch it. "It's for me?" he asked in disbelief. "Yes," Emily said gently. "It's for you." James carefully unwrapped the paper. Inside was a small, soft teddy bear wearing a red scarf. Its button eyes seemed to look at him with a kind understanding, as if it had been waiting for him. James blinked. He didn't know what to say. His small voice barely whispered, "Thank you." Emily smiled warmly. "You deserve it, James. You deserve every bit of love and warmth today." For the first time in months, James felt something swell inside him, a spark of joy he had thought forever lost. Stepping outside into the snow, Emily suggested they go outside for a walk in the freshly fallen snow. James hesitated at first. He had spent so many days in bitter cold without anyone caring if he froze. But with Emily by his side, he slowly agreed. The streets of Cleveland were quiet. Snow muffled the usual morning bustle, and the Christmas decorations on every house glowed softly in the soft winter light. James trudged through the snow, boots crunching under his feet, feeling the cold bite at his cheeks. But he didn't complain. He was distracted by the glimmering lights, the wreaths on every door, and the occasional sound of children laughing in the distance. Emily walked beside him, her hand gently brushing his shoulder. "You're brave, James," she said. "Walking through snow like this takes courage." James shrugged, though he felt the truth of her words deep in his chest. He had been brave every day since losing his parents. Brave enough to survive, brave enough to hope. A chance encounter. As they walked toward the city square, they noticed a small crowd gathered near the large fountain, its icy waters reflecting the Christmas lights. A volunteer organization was distributing warm meals and blankets to children in need. James's stomach tightened. He hadn't eaten properly in days, surviving mostly on scraps and small handouts. Emily noticed the look in his eyes and gently said, "Would you like to get a meal? Something warm to eat?" James nodded shyly. They joined the line, and soon James held a small tray with a steaming bowl of soup, a sandwich, and a cup of hot chocolate. He took a careful bite of the soup. Warmth spread through his body, melting some of the cold and fear that had gripped him for months. A little girl nearby offered him a piece of chocolate. "Merry Christmas," she said with a shy smile. "Merry Christmas," James replied, taking the chocolate and smiling back. It was awkward at first, but real. For the first time in months, James felt included. The Christmas miracle. After finishing their meal, Emily led James to a small stage set up in the square. Volunteers were handing out donated gifts to children in need. James watched quietly as kids around him received toys, clothes, and blankets. Some laughed, some hugged their parents, some cried with joy. When it was his turn, a volunteer knelt beside him. "And what would you like this Christmas, young man?" she asked. James's voice trembled. He had learned to be careful with his wishes. Wishes could be broken, promises could be empty. I don't know," he whispered. Emily knelt beside him, squeezing his hand gently. "You deserve whatever makes you happy," she said. The volunteer smiled and handed him a small box. James opened it carefully. Inside was a soft winter coat, thicker and warmer than any he had ever worn, gloves, a scarf, and a pair of sturdy boots. James froze. He couldn't speak. The tears welled up in his eyes, but this time they weren't only from sadness. They were from the overwhelming kindness he had never expected. "This is for you," Emily whispered. "Merry Christmas, James." James wrapped the coat around him, feeling warmth spread from his chest to his fingers. He clutched the gloves and scarf, the teddy bear and his cocoa cup, and finally whispered, almost in disbelief, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Emily hugged him tightly. "You're welcome, James. You deserve every bit of this joy. Always." A heart reborn. James walked back toward the church slowly, carrying his new gifts. Every step felt lighter, every breath warmer. The snow didn't feel so cold, the streets didn't feel so lonely. And for the first time since the accident, he smiled. Not the small, hesitant smile he had given Emily days ago. A full smile, shaky but real. He felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. And maybe, just maybe, a little bit of happiness. Emily walked beside him, smiling softly. "See, James? Miracles can happen even when everything feels lost." James looked at the falling snowflakes, catching them on his tongue, letting their cold kiss wake up his senses. He imagined his parents watching him from above, proud and smiling, seeing that his little boy was not just surviving, but starting to live again. He hugged the teddy bear close and whispered softly, "Mom, Dad, look, I'm okay." And for the first time since that fateful night, James truly believed it. That night, as James lay in his warm cot, wrapped in the thick coat and blanket, with the teddy bear by his side, he closed his eyes and felt the world around him. It wasn't perfect. He still missed his parents. He still carried pain and fear. But something had changed. He had warmth, safety, and kindness surrounding him. He had someone who cared, someone who would never leave. And he had a little spark of hope that Christmas could bring miracles, even to a boy who had lost everything. Outside, the snow continued to fall, silent and pure. And above, the stars twinkled faintly, watching over the little boy named James, whose heart had begun to heal. The first light of Christmas morning filtered softly through the frosted church windows. The golden sun painted the room in hues of warmth, contrasting with the cold, white snow outside. James Carter stirred under his thick new coat, the blanket tucked snugly around him, and the teddy bear clutched tightly to his chest. For the first time in months, James awoke not with fear, but with a quiet, tentative sense of anticipation. Something about this morning felt different. Something about this Christmas felt possible. He glanced around the small room. The candles he had helped light the night before still flickered softly, and the tree in the corner twinkled brightly, adorned with handmade ornaments and shimmering lights. For a moment, James allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to be home again. Not a perfect home, he knew that wasn't possible, but a place where love and warmth existed, a place where he could be a child again. James heard the gentle creak of the door and looked up. Pastor Emily Dawson stepped inside, carrying a small tray of pancakes, warm cocoa, and fresh fruit. "Good morning, James," she said softly, kneeling beside his cot. "Merry Christmas." James blinked at her. Merry Christmas," he whispered. Emily set the tray beside him. "I made you breakfast. I thought today deserved something special." James hesitated. He hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, but more than that, he had never felt this level of care. Slowly, he reached for the fork and took a bite of the warm, sweet pancake. The taste brought back a flood of memories. Memories of his mother humming in the kitchen, of his father flipping pancakes and pretending he wasn't excited. For the first time in months, James smiled while eating. It was quiet, small, hesitant, but real. Emily watched him, her heart swelling. See, Christmas mornings can be magical, even after the darkest nights. James nodded quietly, eyes still glistening. After breakfast, Emily suggested a short walk outside to enjoy the Christmas morning air. James, wrapped in his new coat, gloves, scarf, and boots, hesitated only briefly before agreeing. The snow had stopped falling overnight, leaving the streets sparkling under the pale winter sun. Children ran past, sledding down snowbanks and laughing and squealing with delight. Families walked together, carrying gifts, hot chocolate, and joy. For James, it was both beautiful and bittersweet. Every cheerful face reminded him of the family he had lost, of Christmas mornings that would never come again. Emily noticed his hesitation and gently took his hand. "You don't have to do this alone, James," she said softly. "I'll be right here." James looked up at her, and for the first time, he felt a glimmer of safety in the bustling, joyous world outside. The gift of belonging. They walked toward the town square, where a small Christmas gathering was underway. Carolers sang softly in the distance, and children's laughter filled the air. Volunteers handed out blankets, toys, and small treats for kids in need. A little girl ran up to James with a candy can. "Merry Christmas," she said brightly, holding it out to him. James hesitated, then smiled shyly and accepted it. "Merry Christmas," he whispered. Emily smiled at the small interaction. "See, James, you belong here too. Even if life has been hard, you're not alone anymore." For the first time, James allowed himself to imagine a future where he belonged, where he was cared for, where kindness existed even after tragedy. The miracle of the morning. As the crowd began to gather around a large Christmas tree in the square, Emily knelt beside James. "Would you like to help place the star on the tree?" James blinked. "Me?" "Yes," Emily said, smiling. "It's your moment. You get to do something special." With trembling hands, James approached the tree. Volunteers lifted him slightly so he could reach the top. Carefully, he placed the star atop the tallest branch. The lights shimmered, reflecting in his wide, tear-filled eyes. A hush fell over the crowd, followed by soft applause. James stood there, heart pounding, realizing something profound. He had made a difference. Even in his small way, he mattered. Emily hugged him gently. "See, James, you're part of this world. You belong. You can shine." James looked at the star, then at Emily, then at the gathered children around him. For the first time in months, he felt hope, not just for today, but for tomorrow. A letter to heaven. That night, back at the church, James sat quietly on his cot. He held his teddy bear close and whispered softly into the still room. "Mom, Dad, I had a Christmas. I think you would like it. It's warm. I'm safe. I'm not alone. Thank you for everything." He didn't cry this time, not from pain, not from fear. He smiled softly, feeling the warmth of the church, the kindness of Emily, the magic of the Christmas morning. Somehow, he knew his parents were watching. Somehow, he knew they were proud. The first true Christmas smile. James placed the teddy bear beside him and looked around the cozy church room. Lights twinkled, candles flickered, and the snow outside glimmered under the moonlight. He realized something important. Christmas wasn't just about gifts or decorations or food. It was about love, safety, belonging. And for the first time since that terrible accident, James Carter felt all three. He smiled, a real, full, shining smile that reached his eyes. A smile that said, I survived. I'm here. I'm loved. Emily peeked in from the doorway and saw him smiling, her heart swelling with joy. Merry Christmas, James, she whispered. Merry Christmas, James whispered back, and for the first time, he meant it completely. Outside, the stars shone brightly over Cleveland. Inside, the warmth of love and kindness wrapped around a small boy who had lost everything and found hope again. And that Christmas morning, James Carter learned the greatest miracle of all. Even in the darkest winters, hearts can heal. Even when life takes everything from you, love and kindness can give it all back. The morning after James had placed the star atop the Christmas tree, a soft sunbeam filtered through the church windows, painting the wooden floor with warm light. The snow outside had melted slightly, leaving sparkling frost along the edges of the sidewalks. The town was waking up slowly, children laughing in the streets, families rushing to prepare Christmas meals. But inside the cozy church, James Carter sat quietly on his cot, hugging his teddy bear. He was still wrapped in his thick coat, gloves, and scarf, gifts from the previous day, and he stared at the flickering Christmas lights with a quiet awe. For the first time in weeks, James didn't feel the sharp ache of loss. He didn't feel completely invisible. He felt safe. But he didn't yet know that Christmas had one more miracle in store. A knock at the door. Emily entered the room with a gentle smile. James, I have a visitor, someone who wants to meet you. James tilted his head, puzzled. Visitor? Yes, someone who has been thinking about you, who wants to bring some joy to your Christmas. James's stomach twisted nervously. Visitors usually meant trouble, questions, or people who didn't care, but something in Emily's tone made him curious. A few moments later, the door opened and a kind-faced woman stepped inside. Her golden hair glowed in the sunlight, and her warm smile radiated kindness. James? She asked softly. James blinked. Yes? My name is Margaret Thompson, she said gently. I heard about you from Pastor Emily, and I wanted to meet you. I think we might be able to help each other. James swallowed, unsure what she meant. Emily stepped closer. James, Margaret and her husband lost their child a few years ago. They've been hoping to open their hearts to a child who needs love, and they want to meet you. James's mouth went dry. His heart thumped loudly. A family? For him? He had never imagined such a thing. The first meeting. Margaret knelt down to his level, her hands folded gently in front of her. James, she said softly, I know this is sudden, and I know it might be scary, but I want you to know we don't want to replace your mom or dad. We just want to be your family, if you'll let us. James blinked. His throat tightened. He wanted to speak, to scream, to cry, but nothing came out. Emily gently squeezed his shoulder. James, you don't have to decide now. Just think about it. James nodded slowly, tears threatening to spill. His small voice trembled. I don't know if I can be a part of a family again. Margaret's eyes glistened. You don't have to be ready right away, but we'll be here, every step of the way. No pressure, only love. For the first time in months, James felt hope, real hope. An afternoon of joy. That afternoon, Emily suggested they take a walk to the Christmas market one last time. James hesitated at first, unsure if he could face the crowds again. But Margaret and her husband followed at a distance, smiling warmly, giving him space to adjust. The market was alive with laughter, music, and the scent of roasted chestnuts. James wandered through the stalls, his new gloves keeping his hands warm and his boots crunching in the fresh snow. He stopped at a small stall filled with handmade ornaments. His eyes widened at a tiny wooden sleigh. Without thinking, he picked it up and handed it to Margaret. "Here," he said quietly. "For you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "James, that's beautiful. Thank you." For the first time, James realized something important. He could give love as well as receive it, and that made his heart swell with a warmth he hadn't felt in months. The gift of belonging. As the day turned into evening, Emily led James to a quiet park bench decorated with Christmas lights. The streets were alive with families and children, but here it was peaceful. James hugged his teddy bear tightly and whispered, I think I might like having a family again, but I'm scared." Emily knelt beside him. "It's okay to be scared, James. It's normal. But sometimes love finds you when you least expect it." James nodded slowly. He looked over at Margaret and her husband, standing a few feet away, smiling kindly. Could he trust them? Could he allow himself to hope again? The thought terrified him, but deep down, a small spark of courage flickered. A Christmas evening to remember. That night, Emily prepared a small Christmas dinner for James and the Thompsons. The table was modest but warm, with simple dishes and a tiny candle flickering in the center. James sat quietly, his hands folded on his lap, feeling the unfamiliar sensation of being part of something. The Thompsons didn't rush him. They didn't ask him to smile or act happy. They just let him exist, safe and cared for. Margaret leaned close and whispered, "James, you are always welcome here. Always." James's heart ached with emotion. He had survived so much. He had felt pain, loss, and loneliness, but now he felt hope, real hope. He looked over at Emily, then at the Thompsons, and whispered softly, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Emily smiled, tears in her eyes. "Never, James, never." The first night of belonging. That night, James lay in his cot, the teddy bear tucked beside him, his coat hanging neatly on the chair. The snow continued to fall outside, soft and silent, but inside, James's heart was no longer heavy with grief. He had warmth, kindness, and love surrounding him. And maybe most importantly, he had hope. He closed his eyes and whispered into the quiet room, "Merry Christmas, Mom and Dad. I think I'm going to be okay." For the first time since the accident, James truly believed it. And above, the stars twinkled, silent witnesses to the miracle of a little boy who had lost everything and found love again. James awoke to the soft glow of Christmas morning sunlight filtering through the church windows. His small hand clutched the teddy bear tightly, the warmth of the blanket and his thick coat providing comfort he had never known in months. The snow outside glimmered, untouched and pure, as though the world itself had paused to honor this special day. For James Carter, this Christmas morning was different. He could feel it in the air, in his chest, and in the way the light touched his face. Today, something extraordinary was going to happen. A surprise visit. Emily entered the room quietly, holding a small envelope in her hand. "James," she said softly, "there's someone here to see you." James blinked, unsure who it could be. Visitors had always been strangers or people who wanted something from him. Emily knelt beside him. "It's the Thompsons." James' heart skipped a beat. Margaret and her husband had been kind, gentle, and patient, but he had never imagined he could truly belong to a family again. "Would you like to see them?" Emily asked. James nodded slowly, his small voice barely a whisper. "Yes." The first family hug. James walked toward the front doors of the church. Outside, Margaret and her husband were waiting, smiling warmly. The crisp winter air made James shiver, but their kindness wrapped around him like a second blanket. "Good morning, James," Margaret said softly. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," James whispered, his voice trembling. Her husband knelt down, opening his arms. "Would you like to be part of our family?" James froze. His eyes filled with tears. The thought of being wanted, loved, and safe was overwhelming. But slowly, he stepped forward. He wrapped his small arms around them both, hugging them tightly. For the first time in months, James felt the sensation of belonging. Real, solid, unwavering belonging. A walk through the winter wonderland. The Thompsons had decorated their small home nearby with twinkling lights, a Christmas tree in the corner, and a warm glow from the fireplace. James walked beside them, carrying his teddy bear, marveling at the transformation from fear and loneliness to love and warmth. Margaret handed him a small gift, a tiny wooden train set. "For you, James, to start your new Christmas traditions." James' eyes widened. "For me?" "Yes," Margaret said softly, "because you belong here now." James hugged the gift to his chest, tears rolling freely down his cheeks. He had been so used to being alone, to surviving, to fearing attachment, but now he could allow himself to hope. The Christmas breakfast. Inside the Thompsons' home, the aroma of pancakes, cinnamon, and fresh fruit filled the air. James sat at the table, wide-eyed and amazed. He had never seen so much care and effort put into a meal just for him. Emily watched from the doorway, her heart swelling with pride. James carefully picked up his fork and took a bite of pancake. He closed his eyes, savoring the warmth, sweetness, and care that had gone into it. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine the Christmas mornings he had lost, with his parents laughing, joking, and celebrating. And then he realized this could be a new beginning. A letter to heaven. After breakfast, James sat by the Christmas tree, clutching his teddy bear. He whispered softly, almost in prayer, "Mom, Dad, I had a Christmas, a real Christmas. It's warm. I'm safe. I have people who love me. Thank you for watching over me. I'm going to be okay." Tears streamed down his face, but they were not only from sadness. They were from the overwhelming joy and gratitude that had filled his heart. Emily, standing quietly behind him, brushed a strand of hair from his face. "They're proud of you, James," she whispered. James nodded, his lips trembling. "I think I'm ready to be happy again." The Christmas miracle. Later that afternoon, James played with his new wooden train set, laughing softly as it rolled along the tracks. Margaret and her husband watched with warm smiles, and Emily stood nearby, quietly observing. For James, this day was more than Christmas. It was a miracle, a chance to start over, to feel love, to be a child again. He realized that Christmas wasn't about gifts, decorations, or even snow. It was about connection, warmth, and kindness, the true magic of the season. And for James Carter, the boy who had lost everything, it had arrived in the form of a family that would never let him go. A heart transformed. As night fell, James curled up on the couch beside Margaret and her husband, the teddy bear tucked beside him. The Christmas tree twinkled softly in the background, and the fireplace crackled, filling the room with warmth. He felt safe. He felt loved. He felt home. For the first time since the accident, James smiled without hesitation. His heart, once broken, was slowly mending. Outside, the snow fell softly, covering the world in white. Above, the stars shone brightly, as though celebrating the miracle that had taken place in a small home in Cleveland. And as James drifted off to sleep, he whispered one final grateful thought: "Merry Christmas, and thank you for never giving up on me." The morning after James's first Christmas with the Thompsons dawned crisp and clear. Sunlight spilled across the living room, bouncing off the Christmas tree ornaments and lighting up the cozy house. For James Carter, the world looked brighter than it had in months, maybe even longer. He woke up still clutching his teddy bear, the thick coat and warm boots from the previous day neatly placed by the door. The smell of fresh pancakes wafted from the kitchen, mixed with cinnamon and the faint aroma of oranges. James smiled, a genuine smile that had returned only after experiencing love, kindness, and acceptance. Today wasn't just a new day, it was the beginning of a new life. First morning routines. Margaret entered the room carrying a plate of warm pancakes, topped with fresh fruit and syrup. "Good morning, James," she said warmly. "Sleep well?" James nodded, rubbing his eyes. "Yes, and thank you." "You're welcome, sweetheart," she replied, kneeling beside him. "You get to start your day however you like. Today is just for you." James's eyes sparkled. For the first time, he felt freedom. Not the freedom to run away or survive, but the freedom to be a child, to play, to laugh, to learn that life could be safe, warm, and joyful again. Breakfast conversation. James sat at the table, eagerly eating his pancakes. The Thompsons joined him, sitting on either side with warm smiles. "You did an amazing thing yesterday," Margaret said gently. "Placing the star on the tree, it was brave and it inspired everyone." James blushed slightly. I was just trying to help." Her husband, Michael, leaned forward. "No, James, you didn't just help. You shone. You reminded all of us why Christmas matters. Sometimes the smallest hearts give the biggest lessons." James swallowed, feeling warmth in his chest. He had spent so long feeling invisible, unloved, and forgotten. Now, here were people who not only saw him, but celebrated him. A walk to the park. After breakfast, the family decided to take a walk in the nearby park. The snow, still fresh and glistening, made the world look magical. Children laughed in the distance, sledding down small hills, building snowmen, and making snow angels. James tugged at Michael's hand, pointing to a small hill. "Can I try sledding?" "Of course," Michael said with a smile. "We'll do it together." James's heart raced as they climbed the hill. For the first time, he felt a thrill that had nothing to do with fear, only joy. He slid down, laughing uncontrollably, and Michael caught him at the bottom. Margaret clapped and cheered. "That's my boy!" James giggled, hugging his parents' figures tightly. For the first time, he felt safe, loved, and free. A visit to the toy store. After the park, Margaret suggested they visit a small toy store nearby. James's eyes widened in wonder. Rows upon rows of toys, books, and games. Something he had only glimpsed in store windows, never touched or held. "You can pick one thing, James. Just one. But choose something you really want." James wandered slowly, touching each toy reverently. His heart raced. He had never been given such freedom, such choice. Finally, he stopped at a small model train set, wooden tracks polished and shining. "This one," he whispered. Margaret smiled. "Good choice." James hugged the box to his chest, tears threatening. The sheer joy of having something just for him was overwhelming. Learning trust. That evening, back at home, James sat near the fireplace with Michael and Margaret. They told stories of their past, sharing laughter and memories. For the first time, James realized he could trust people again. You know, James, life can take away a lot of things, but it can also give back, sometimes in ways you never imagine. James nodded, hugging his teddy bear. I think I understand now. Margaret smiled. It takes time, sweetheart, but you've already taken the first step. James leaned back, feeling safe, loved, and part of something bigger than himself. The first night in his new home. That night, James curled up in his new bed, a proper bed, warm blankets and soft pillows. He held the teddy bear close, staring at the ceiling, thinking of the past weeks, the accident, the nights of loneliness, the cold shelter, and the Christmas miracle that brought him here. He whispered softly into the quiet room, "Mom? Dad? I'm okay. I think I'm happy." Outside, snowflakes fell gently against the windows. The house was silent, warm, and safe. For the first time in his life, James Carter went to sleep without fear, without emptiness, and without longing for the impossible. He had a family, he had love, he had hope. And as he drifted into sleep, he dreamed of bright lights, snowflakes, and a future filled with joy. A life that had been taken from him, now returned tenfold by kindness, patience, and the true spirit of Christmas. The morning sun rose over Cleveland, painting the snowy streets in a soft golden glow. Inside the Thompson home, James Carter woke with a sense of excitement he had not felt in months, maybe even years. Today was Christmas morning, and it felt different from every Christmas he had known. For the first time in his life, James didn't wake up to fear, loneliness, or sadness. He woke up to warmth, love, and a family that had chosen him. The morning ritual. James jumped out of bed, still clutching his teddy bear. Margaret and Michael were already in the kitchen, preparing a special Christmas breakfast. The smell of pancakes, cinnamon rolls, and hot chocolate filled the air. "Good morning, James," Margaret called cheerfully. "Merry Christmas!" "Merry Christmas!" James shouted back, rushing into the kitchen with a huge smile. Michael knelt beside him, ruffling his hair. "You ready for a day full of surprises, buddy?" "Yes! I can't wait!" The joy in his voice was contagious. After months of emptiness, this boy's laughter rang like bells, filling the house with life. The Christmas tree. After breakfast, the family gathered around their beautifully decorated Christmas tree. James carefully arranged his new toys and the gifts he had received, placing the little wooden train set in a prominent spot. "James," Margaret said softly, "I have a promise for you." James tilted his head. "A promise?" "Yes," she smiled. "We promise to always be your family, not just for today, not just for Christmas, but forever. We promise to love you, care for you, and never leave you." James's heart swelled. Tears pricked his eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. He had lived through pain and loss, through loneliness and fear, and now he had a family that would never abandon him. I promise too. I'll be a part of this family, and I'll love you too." They embraced tightly, a family finally made whole. A walk in the snow. Later that morning, the family bundled up and stepped outside. The snow glistened in the sunlight, untouched and perfect. James held Margaret's hand while Michael carried a small sled, and together they walked through the quiet neighborhood. They came upon a small hill, perfect for sledding. James's eyes lit up and he eagerly jumped onto the sled, Michael pushing him gently down the hill. Laughter erupted from James, unrestrained and pure. Margaret cheered from the top of the hill, clapping her hands. For James, this moment was more than just fun. It was a revelation. Life could be joyful again. Life could be safe, warm, and full of love. Sharing kindness. After playing in the snow, the Thompsons led James to a small Christmas charity event nearby. They distributed food, warm clothing, and toys to children in need. James watched as other kids received gifts, their faces lighting up with joy. Emily joined them, smiling proudly. "Look at you, James. You've come so far." James looked around, holding his teddy bear. I want to help too," he whispered. Margaret nodded. "Of course, sweetheart. You can always share your kindness. That's what makes Christmas truly magical." James handed a small toy train to a little boy who had no shoes, his small heart swelling with pride. For the first time, he realized the true meaning of giving. It wasn't about receiving, it was about making someone else happy. A letter to the stars. That night, James lay in bed, the glow of the Christmas tree spilling softly into his room. He held his teddy bear close and whispered softly, almost in prayer, "Mom, Dad, I'm okay. I have a family. I'm safe. I'm loved. Thank you for watching over me." He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the house, the love of his new parents, and the kindness of Emily. His heart was no longer broken. It was whole. Somewhere above, the stars twinkled as if acknowledging his words, shining softly over a little boy who had survived heartbreak, loss, and loneliness, and found joy, hope, and family. The first family Christmas promise. The next morning, the Thompsons officially adopted James. The ceremony was small but beautiful, attended by Emily and a few close friends. James wore a small suit, his teddy bear tucked under one arm. When the judge officially declared him a member of the Thompson family, James couldn't stop smiling. He hugged Margaret and Michael tightly, whispering, "I love you." Margaret whispered back, "We love you too, James, forever." Michael added, "And we'll always be here for you, no matter what." In that moment, James felt something he had never felt before, a sense of belonging so complete it filled every corner of his heart. A Christmas to remember. That night, James curled up in his new bed, surrounded by warmth, love, and the faint scent of pine from the Christmas tree. He held his teddy bear close, thinking of the miracles that had brought him here, the kindness of strangers, Emily's unwavering support, and the love of the Thompsons. He whispered softly into the quiet room, "Merry Christmas, and thank you for giving me a family." And for the first time since the accident, James Carter went to sleep knowing that he was safe, loved, and never alone.